Hey team. Speak for success, based on the idea of talk like TED, but we're not allowed to use the TED brand name apparently, because Merck are in conversation with TED about doing something else. I think there is a Merck TED event, so we're going to avoid that. We're going to call it Speak for Success, but it was inspired by one of the Merck guys, Christian Schroter, who has done a TED talk as part of a Merck event. So it's inspired by him, which is fab. And you can make reference to him. He helped us put this together. He was part of the intelligence that kind of put this together. Opening, as always, let's show the aims. So we're going to look at the aims. Having done the aims, then dive into the action. You are going to surprise them, and this is a bit like the comfort zone one. So we start in the same way. The difference is we're actually going to follow it through. Take a post-it note and write your name on it, then return it to the trainer. And then with the trainer gets it, and then you have 5 minutes to prepare a 2-minute talk on a subject of your choice. Choose something about you, choose something you care about. It could be a hobby, a charity you support, someone who inspired you, a message or insight you wish to share. So you've handed out the post-its, you've got their names, and you've collected them back in, and you've got them in a container. And then you're going to give them that brief. At the end of the 5 minutes, you're going to say, right, I'm going to pull 3 names out of the hat, and those individuals are going to stand up and present to the rest of the group, and we're going to give them some feedback. Is everybody up for it? Brilliant. Take out a name, get them to do it, give them the option not to do it if they find it really intimidating, and then you're going to crack on. Let them do their talk, give them some positive praise. Don't necessarily need to give any developmental feedback at this point, but acknowledge what it is they've done well. What did people like? Do 3, I think that's probably a reasonable number. Having done the 3, you can then go get them all sat back down and say, right, let's really talk about what makes a good talk. How do we get that across in such a way that it's compelling and it's exciting? And then we've got a video to play. So you move on to the next slide. Let's see how the professionals do it. And you move on, and sure enough, it goes into your TED Talk, which is embedded in the PowerPoint. Check that it works. There's a copy of it in the folder. Make sure that it's working on your presentation, okay? I'm not going to let the whole thing play through. You'll watch it, but it is clever.
Hear that? That's nothing.
So, moving on. There we go. So the idea is that you're going to show that TED Talk. Having done that, have a little smile about it, talk about the significance of it. If you had time, what I would do is show it first silent and get them to sort of reflect upon it, and then show it again with the words, and that it looks compelling and interesting when you show it with no sound, and then when you see it for real, you realise it's actually quite comical. But anyway, you probably won't have time to do that. So let's have a look at the model. We're then going to teach them some stuff. So they've got their 3-minute presentations, 2-minute presentations that they put together. 3 of them have had a go. Then you're going to give them some content. 4 basic bits of information: the open and the close, transparent messages, broken story technique, and numbers, props, pictures, and spacing. So you're going to give them these 4 tools to play with. Open and close. You've got 1 chance to make a first impression, and people will remember the last thing you leave them with. So start with an impactful opening. You can do something, you can tell a joke, you can make reference to something that's gone on, but start with a powerful opening and then leave them with a key message. It could be a call to action, it could be, it could be a call to action, it could be something you want them to consider or a decision they have to make, but be impactful with the opening and the closing. Transparent messages, nice and straightforward, but a transparent message is a message you write to yourself in your notes that engenders the emotional quality you want to give the moment. So if you want to get across how upset and frustrated you are with where things are at the moment, so you're in a business presentation, you're doing a PowerPoint, and you want to kind of embody that as much as you can, you might write "stuck in a traffic jam, desperate to get home." And you might be able to read that and kind of get yourself into the emotional state of the moment in order to put across your frustration. You're obviously not going to talk about it, but it's a transparent message that you tell yourself in order to embody the emotional quality you're trying to achieve. Broken stories are really powerful, and you'll have seen me doing this if you've watched any of my other videos. It's where you tell the beginning of a story, you dive into, start to tell the story, and then you might say, and I'll tell you what happens at the end of the session. and then you go into the content of whatever you're trying to talk about and loop back to your broken story later on and tell the denouement. I did it just the other day with a group, and they were desperate to hear what the end of the story was. So think about your own stories to introduce a topic, and obviously they've got to have a relationship to the topic, but think about the stories you've got that you could break up either side of the important learning. And then finally, numbers, props, pictures and spacing. Numbers are always impactful, even the number 3, even saying, so having done all this research, there are 2 things I think we need to remember, and specify, label it with a really clear number. If you were to leave my presentation and only do 1 thing, this is what I would ask you to do. So using numbers is super powerful. Props, items, anything you can take in by having, it might be that you want to talk about, shining a light on the topic, and you might want to use a torch in order to do that. So something that is impactful and is significant and allows you to make a point in your presentation. Pictures, this is relating to PowerPoint. PowerPoint is an overused medium, we know that. It's a visual medium. Data, words and numbers can be portrayed in Excel spreadsheets and documentation, or can be seen online. Use pictures rather than text wherever possible with your PowerPoint. So try and use as many images as possible. And then finally, spacing. This is about the pace and the speed at which you deliver. Spacing is a combination of silence and pace. Change the pace, up it a little bit, change the volume in the intonation and the tone, but also leave gaps. So teaching people spacing, this idea of putting spaces in, changing the pace and silence, is another part of the process. Having taught them those elements, what you're going to get them to do is rework their little speeches. So they're going to now take their 2-minute presentation, they're going to apply something from that teaching you've just done, give them some time to do that. I would say 5 minutes is probably enough, and then get them into groups of 5, and you'll have 1 speaker and you'll have an audience, and the speaker delivers their talk, and break them off around the room. And you want to get through as many of them as you can, and we want the audience to watch them and then give them some feedback. Did they use a good opening? Was there a key message? What was their key message? How was the space, the silence and the pacing? And did they use broken stories, for example, or numbers? So what tools and techniques did they use? So as much practice as possible, and then finish with a plenary conversation. You can use the handouts. I would absolutely, whilst they're reworking and doing the group activity, go around and give the handouts. And then obviously, as always, our closing piece of work, get yourselves together in 3s. What have you learned? What's your insight? What actions are you going to commit to? It's a really good session, this one, the Speak for Success. It's super proactive, it's super participatory, gets people a little bit nervous when you do the initial exercise, but it seems to work really well. It was very popular when I did it in the pilot, and I hope you have as much fun with it as Christian and I had when we put it together. Good luck, team.